When I first moved in with my husband, I tried to do what every minimalist secretly dreams of: minimize the entire household. And this was a big mistake. I personally love tracking what I own. I declutter regularly and I keep things simple. So naturally, I started listing, categorizing and organizing everything he brought into our home too. I also judged him for owning so much stuff, but even worse, I complained about it constantly. Until one day I realized how ridiculous that actually is. Of course, he knew that I was a minimalist, but he didn't really understand how minimalism worked or why I love it so much. And instead of showing him the benefits, I was basically running the world's worst marketing campaign for minimalism. The more I focused on what was wrong with his stuff, the messier also my own life became. I stopped paying attention to my own systems. I stopped maintaining the routines that helped me so much before. Instead of cleaning up my own messes, I kept thinking if they were cleaner, I could finally feel calm. So I made a decision. I stopped focusing on him and started focusing on myself again. I went back to tracking my own things: my wardrobe, my beauty product, my tech stuff. I became obsessed with optimizing my own little world. What clothes do I actually wear? How can I charge all of my devices with one cable? How can I simplify my beauty routines even further? I focused only on what is inside my circle of influence. And suddenly I realized the more organized and intentional your own life becomes, the less other people's stuff bothers you. And interestingly enough, the more focused I became on my own things, the more curious other people became about it. Friends started asking me about my wardrobe and about minimalism because they could see how much joy it actually brings to me. So if there is one thing I'd recommend when living with someone else, it's this: focus on yourself first and not their stuff, your stuff. Where could you simplify? Where could you improve a system? And start there. The second thing that helped me was to create clear zones. We have my zones, we have his zones, and we have shared zones. I think everyone needs a space that is completely their own. For me, that's my wardrobe, a cupboard, part of the bathroom, and a drawer. And nobody touches it. And honestly, even if it's just a tiny corner, I think everyone needs one. A place where you can organize things exactly the way you like them. Not Pinterest perfect, but you're perfect. Now let's talk about your partner's zones, because this is where many minimalists get into trouble. You are not allowed to touch it. Seriously. Even if it looks chaotic, even if you don't understand it, leave it alone. Not everyone needs minimalism. Some people can find any document in seconds inside what looks like a complete chaos. The only rule is that the chaos stays in their zone. Don't organize or touch it, and don't judge it. Just leave it. If they ever become curious about minimalism, they will ask. And in my experience, they usually do at some point. Now let's talk about the shared spaces. That's where real work happens. At first, I simply observed. Where do things naturally end up? For example, our dog's leash was always laying around. So we added a little hook. Keys needed a home. So we created one. Shoes, jackets. The goal isn't to create the perfect system. The goal is to create a system that people actually use. Start simple and then improve it over time. Most people actually don't mind organization. They only mind this complicated organization. And finally, a few basic rules are very important for shared zones. Not because of minimalism, because of respect of each other. Shared spaces should work for everyone, but choose your battles. If someone leaves a sweater on a chair because they're wearing it again tomorrow, who cares? Not everything needs to be put away immediately. I often just ask questions instead. When do you need this again? Why does it live here? Sometimes there is actually a good reason. And sometimes they realize themselves that it should be put away. Be clear about your standards, but also stay flexible. Not everything matters equally. And most importantly, be patient. And if patience isn't your thing, try meditation or try listening and singing to mantras. That's something I really like to do because living with other people is probably one of the greatest patience practices you will ever get. Now, here is something that might surprise you. In my experience, it's actually easier to live with a non-minimalist than with another minimalist. I know, it sounds completely backwards, but I once had a roommate who was also a minimalist. And honestly, we argued way more than I ever did with a chaotic person. Why? Because minimalists are particular. We have our opinions. The best pan to cook, the best way to fold towels, the best way to organize a cupboard. The problem is, none of these things are universal. They are very personal. And what feels perfect to one minimalist might drive another minimalist crazy. And because many minimalists have strong routines, there is actually a lot more potential for friction. Meanwhile, my husband genuinely doesn't care what pan we use. And honestly, that's kind of relaxing. Once you've figured out a few systems together, living with a non-minimalist can be surprisingly easy. I also noticed that maximalists are often much more relaxed about sharing things. If someone borrowed one of my favorite outfits and lost it, I'll probably have a small internal crisis. Because when you own very little, every item matters more. But my maximalist friends, I borrow things from them all the time. No problem. So if you're living with a non-minimalist, don't only focus on the challenges. There are actually quite a few benefits too. And while we're talking about the good sides of living with non-minimalists, there is one practice I highly recommend: gratitude. For every person in my life, I keep a small note in my phone. Whenever I notice something I appreciate about them, I write it down. Something they did, or a character trait, a moment that made me smile. And whenever I'm frustrated with someone, I read that list. It reminds me why I love having them in my life. Because let's be honest, when you're annoyed, all you see are the things that annoy you. You forget everything else. And if you're currently struggling with someone that you live with, try doing this gratitude practice in a journal. Every morning or evening, write down 3 things you appreciate about them. At first, it might feel difficult, but it does get easier. Because there was a reason you let this person into your life. Maybe right now you're frustrated by their habits. But chances are you fell in love with their humor or their intelligence, their kindness, their energy. Try to reconnect with those things. Because if the only thing you ever talk about is the laundry, the dishes, or the clutter, living together gets pretty miserable. People don't exist just to annoy you. Most people genuinely want to make the people they love happy. So don't spend all your time fixing their flaws. Spend some time enjoying their strengths together too. Here's another rule that really helps me all the time: the who's going to clean it rule. Whenever someone wants to bring something into the home, I ask, who's going to maintain it? Because every item comes with a hidden task. Personally, I can't imagine filling every shelf with decorative objects. Not because I dislike them, but because I don't want to spend hours every week dusting them. My time is just worth more than that, and I don't enjoy it. Now, if someone else wants those decorations, that's totally fine. But the task just comes with the item. If you want it, you maintain it. It's so simple. And what's interesting is that this usually makes people realize how much work something actually creates. Sometimes they still want it, but sometimes they don't. Either way, it's just a much more honest conversation. And while we're talking about household tasks, here's something I've noticed. A lot of people complain that others aren't organized, but then they do everything for them. How is someone supposed to learn the value of an organized home if they never have to maintain it themselves? Everyone should have some ownership, even if one person works more hours, even if responsibilities aren't split 50-50. People need to experience the work behind a household, because only then they start seeing the value of simpler systems, fewer possessions, and better organization. My husband and I, we spend barely any time cleaning these days, because our systems do most of the work for us. And over time, he started to appreciate that too. Another challenge when living with non-minimalists is gifts. Some people love bringing things into your home. Little surprises, decorations, random finds. And sometimes they genuinely think you will be excited about it. The tricky part is that you cannot always just say, don't buy me anything. Because for many people, giving gifts is how they show love. If you reject every gift, they can start feeling like you're rejecting them. So instead of saying no to everything, give people a better target. Tell them what you actually enjoy receiving. For example, I don't like decorative objects, but I don't just say no. I explain them why and what works for me instead. A good candle, a good hand soap, high quality knots to snack on, a beauty product I already use, things like that. Consumable things are amazing gifts and they don't stay in your home forever. Another safe bet in our household are dog toys and dog treats. My husband can bring those home anytime, as long as the drawers still close. At the end of the day, most people just want to make you happy. So help them understand how they can do that in a way that works for you both. And one final tip. Many non-minimalists hold on to old things because those things carry memories. A piece of furniture from their grandparents, an old mirror, a cabinet that has been in the family for decades. And honestly, I think that's a great thing. A shared home doesn't need to look like a minimalist showroom or like a Pinterest picture. In fact, I think homes feel warmer when they contain personal history. So instead of trying to remove everything, look for ways to integrate those pieces into your life. Maybe you keep the old dining table, but you add some new chairs. Maybe the vintage mirror becomes a feature piece. Try to give those things a clear role. And always be specific about what you're open to. Because I have noticed that many maximalists are incredibly creative when you give them a little challenge. If you tell them, I'd love to include something from your family here, but it needs to fit this space, this size, and this function. They'll often come up with ideas that you would probably never have thought of. At the end of the day, a peaceful home isn't created by making everything minimalist. It's created by making everyone feel at home. Not everything in the home needs to be minimalist in order to be peaceful. I hope it helped. I talk to you guys soon. Bye!